funds and operates the Fatherhood Research and Practice Network, which I'll tell you about. Today's webinar is being recorded, and this recording and the slides that we present today will be posted on the FRPN website, www.frpn.org. We will also be providing contact information for all of our presenters, and that will be on the slides. There will be a question period at the end of presentations, so please type in your questions in the QA feature of this, and we'll take them at the end. Next slide tells you a little bit about the Fatherhood Research and Practice Network. So this was founded and funded with a grant by the Office of Planning, Research, and Evaluation of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Since then, as I mentioned, CPR has directed and funded FRPN, and the goals are to promote rigorous evaluation of fatherhood programs and policies, to disseminate information to practitioners, researchers, and policymakers, and to improve policy to support father engagement at the state level. We have funded in the course of this FRPN's history over 20 evaluations of fatherhood programs that deal with issues like the effectiveness of a curriculum in fatherhood programs, mother engagement and co-parenting efforts initiated by fatherhood programs, numerous handling or addressing domestic violence and safety issues in fatherhood programs. That's all available on the website. We've also funded pilot projects on father engagement in 11 states, and those involve small awards of $10,000 in 11 states, aimed at trying to initiate the development of fatherhood policy. And again, those are available, reports on those initiatives are available on those websites. We have webinars and slides for about 25 different webinars that we conducted, and a trove of other information, and published articles, a book, and most recently, a report on policies and programs affecting fathers, a state-by-state report. And that's what this webinar grows out of, that report, and some of our findings from the report. So, as you can see on the next slide, that our report addresses and catalogs policies and programs that are supportive of father engagement, especially low-income and non-resident fathers in the 50 states in the District of Columbia. And we focus on 10 areas of public life. It's very ambitious, and in child support, child welfare, criminal justice, employment, education, early childhood, responsible fatherhood. And within each area, we consulted with a variety of sources, the National Conference of State Legislatures, state plans developed by different agencies in states, websites for states, federal databases, and advocacy organizations and compiled state-by-state information on the status of fathers and father policy in each of these areas. And we identified some key indicators of father supportive father policy in each area, and present really an enormous amount of information on the status of fathers by state. Our goal was to establish a baseline about where fathers stand in the policy world, so that future progress can be tracked, highlight barriers that fathers face, particularly low-income and non-resident fathers face in the policy arena. I identify supportive state policies where they exist, provide a roadmap for other states to pursue as in their quest to identify and adopt a supportive state policy, stimulate better measurement of fatherhood policy, because many states, this kind of indicator, father engagement measures, are not included. They're not really when in programs that deal with children and families, and inspire research and that will identify and document the difference that supportive policies can make for children and families and fathers. That again, we found that type of research is sorely missing. One of the key findings of our research from the in this report, state-by-state report, is really the absence of policy that directly addresses fathers and seeks to promote their well-being and their engagement, positive engagement with their children. And where programs exist, they often don't exist to scale. And so we wanted to, in this webinar, to highlight from the perspective of architects in states that have succeeded in developing policies and programs that have that are supportive for fathers and their engagement. We want to kind of capture some of their lessons learned, their experiences, and sort of help identify how the sausage is made, how these rare beasts, positive state policies come to be and gets initiated and successfully prosecuted. So this is our next slide presents our panel. Today, you're going to hear from Larry Dabian, who is the director of the Division of Child Support Services at the Colorado Department of Human Services. He's going to be talking about child support pass-through, money that's collected on behalf of families that are currently receiving public assistance that get passed through to families rather than reserved for to reimburse the state for public assistance paid out to families. After that, you'll be hearing from Kim Dent, who is the executive director of the Ohio Commission on Fatherhood, which is part of the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. And she will be talking about their state efforts to use TANF funding to support positive the Commission on Fatherhood and initiatives at the state and local level that are father supportive. Next, after that, you'll hear from Pat Littlejohn, who's the former president of the South Carolina Center for Fathers and Families. They have a very comprehensive program statewide for fathers, and she'll be talking about their Jobs, Not Jail program. And finally, Brooke Weiss from the community's correction administrator from the Oregon Department of Corrections will be talking about that state's program and on family sentencing practices. So I'm going to turn this over to Larry to get us started and to hear more about the issues surrounding the child support pass-through, who and what made it happen, what are helpful factors and strategies, what are the biggest challenges, and what are key lessons we can learn from the process. Larry, thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Hello, friends. As Jessica mentioned, my name is Larry Dabian, and I have the pleasure of serving as the director for the Child Support Services Division in Colorado. We're part of the Colorado Department of Human Services, and I really appreciate the opportunity and the invitation from you, Jessica, to allow me to share our experience of this important policy change of passing through the monthly current child support payments to families receiving TANF. Just a little bit of background information before I get started. Colorado has 127,000 open child support cases that we work with parents to provide a wide range of child support services. Colorado is one of the few states where the child support program is administered at the local county level and then supervised at the state level. I work for the state office. One of the key initiatives that's part of our strategic plan in Colorado is to provide child support services to families using a whole person, whole family, whole community approach. And this pass-through program I'm going to share with you is absolutely in alignment with that. We really strive to hear the voice of our customers, the lived experience of our customers, obtain feedback and identify those areas that are important for us to change in order to improve our services to our families. And we also really are working to expand and improve in our outreach about the program to families in Colorado, to stakeholders, community partners, et cetera. And our pass-through program is in direct alignment with that. So if you could please change slide, I'd appreciate it. Just a really brief history lesson about the child support program. In 1975, when it was created at the national level, it was really created as a cost recovery program to reimburse what was at that time called aid to families with dependent children, and now is referred to as temporary assistance for needy families. And the purpose was really to collect dollars and to reimburse taxpayers for the cost of AFDC, as it was mentioned at that time. But the program has really evolved from its initial onset to provide child support services to anyone that wants to receive them and to submit an application. So really, the champion for the whole pass-through program in Colorado was a former state senator named John Gonfalves. John is now a county commissioner in Larimer County, which is one of our counties in Colorado. And he created a stakeholder group that consisted of advocacy groups. It included community partners. It included County Department of Human Services staff. It included staff in my office with the Department of Human Services to talk about crafting legislation to pass through the full current child support payments to families. And that was so critical. Senator Kafalas had friends on both sides of the aisle in both the House and the Senate. And when the bill was introduced in 2015, it was broadly supported across both chambers of both the state House and the state or House of Representatives and the Senate. It was really well supported. And one of the things that was really important with this is that our county partners were absolutely in favor of this legislation. However, and this is not just the case here in Colorado, but certainly the case, I think, in the majority of states, is those collections on TANF cases are used to help fund the child support program at the local and state level. So our counties were in favor of this, but said they really could not continue to provide the child support services at the same level if they lost that source of revenue. So my office had worked with Senator Kafalas and the advocates in the stakeholder group to project what the cost would be in order to continue, pay the child support to families receiving TANF, but also make sure we had dollars available to pay the Federal Office of Child Support and to pay our county partners, because they received about 50% of those retained collections. So the legislature approved that in the bill, and it included language that said every year the General Assembly has the option to appropriate the funding necessary to continue to pass through current child support dollars to TANF families. And they've continued to do so each and every year. So that was really amazing that they were committed to this program and have continued to do so as well. As I mentioned, we did a lot of projections to estimate what that funding cost would be. We looked at collections on TANF cases prior to the implementation of pass-through to give an estimate of what that cost would look like. On the next slide, you're going to see about how successful this program has been, and that we have needed to obtain additional funding because the amount of child support that has been paid by parents since the implementation on pass-through has dramatically increased, dramatically improved, and families receiving those pass-through dollars has increased substantially as well. It took about 1.5 years, 2 years to make all the system changes that were necessary to implement pass-through. There were 3 different computer systems: the one for child support, the one that was used for caseload management on the TANF program, and then the system that is used to submit funding to the county level. So I mentioned one of the challenges were the funding issue, and I've shared what the solution that the legislature came up with. One of the things that we did prior to implementation of pass-through is we did fully integrated joint training with child support professionals and TANF professionals across the state. We did it in multiple sites, brought them into the same room, explained the program, explained the importance of changed messaging, both to the caretakers and parents receiving TANF about that they would begin receiving the child support that was paid by the parents on their case, but also to the parents with the child support obligations, to let them know that with this policy change, the money they pay will now go to their family. And I can tell you, I've been in child support for a number of years, and that was just a really hard discussion to have prior to pass-through implementation about why the government was keeping the money that parents had paid that they wanted to go to their children. So that was really important to change that messaging. We did outreach with parents. We sent postcards to parents with child support obligations to let them know of this policy change, and that when they paid their child support, the money would go to their families. We did outreach to receivers of TANF to let them know about this change so that they could be involved in the child support process in terms of sharing information so we could get child support obligations established. So that was really some key lessons learned from our policy change. Next slide, please. We had an evaluation completed a couple of years ago, and this is one of the slides that I think really tells the story about the importance of passing through child support to the families that deserve it on these TANF cases. The orange vertical line shows the implementation date of April of 2017. To the left of that orange line shows the amount of child support that was paid on TANF cases prior to implementation of the pass-through program. And you can see that anywhere from 300,000 up to 350,000 was the most that was paid in any given month prior to the pass-through implementation. To the right of the implementation line, the orange line, you can see how dramatically the increased payments have been made after we implemented the child support pass-through program. Substantial. You can see beginning in January of 18 through the remainder of 2018, it's been in excess of 500,000, peaking close to 600,000. So why the dramatic increase? We have some really good ideas about why that's important. But one of the things that we did, kind of a lesson learned, when we were doing the stakeholdering group for the legislation, there was a lot of concern about the cliff effect, that if we started collecting child support and paying it to TANF families, we did not want those families kicked off of TANF because of that reason. So my colleagues in the TANF program here in Colorado made a rule change that said, unless the paying parent had paid $500 or more in current child support the last 6 months, then it would not impact the eligibility redetermination for the families receiving TANF. So that was really an important thing. For those cases where child support payments are paid on TANF cases, those families average receipt of $215 a month in child support in addition to their TANF grant, without it impacting negatively their TANF grant. So why the increase? I think it's all about changed messaging. I think that when parents with child support obligations learned that the money they were going to pay was going to go to their family, they were jazzed about it. That was something that was really important to parents. And I think also the communication we did with the caretakers and parents receiving TANF of this change was critical as well, and why we saw some dramatic improvement. We started receiving, really good, helpful information on the location of the parent with the child support obligation. I think that in combination really made a difference. And I wanted to share with you that if any of you would like to receive the evaluation report, I'm happy to share that with you. I've had a number of discussions with my colleagues in many states around the country. They're very interested in looking at this policy change as well. And I'm very pleased to say that many states have either implemented a full pass-through of current child support payments like we did. I know California is one of those states. I know Wyoming is one, and I know there's many others that are in process of doing that as well. So that's my presentation. That's the story of our experience with the pass-through program. And it's just the right thing to do. It's ridiculous that government is keeping child support from the families that need it and deserve it. And this is an important change. And any work you can do in your states and your communities with your child support offices, and particularly on the funding side, that seems to be the biggest roadblock for states considering this, is the loss of revenue. But it can be done, and we learned through our own experience. So Jessica, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much. And I still think Colorado's the only state right now, but others may be in the works, have that in the works. Fingers crossed. Okay, Kim, tell us about funding, using TANF funding for father engagement.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jessica. And yes, good afternoon and good morning to everyone. It's afternoon here in Ohio. So Larry, thank you so much for that. I actually started my government work at the local child support agency and then moved over to the State Office of Child Support. So thank you so much for that presentation. It's so important that we do know what's going on in child support in our respective states. And so the Commission on Fatherhood, yes, we are the only state that has a Commission on Fatherhood that functions the way that we actually do. We are looking at the next biennial budget, $11 million in fatherhood funding. And so I want to talk a little bit about what we plan to do with that funding. And some of the plans are what we're doing right now as well. So we primarily fund under TANF purposes 3 and 4. As most of you know, prevent and reduce the incidence of out-of-wedlock pregnancies is TANF purpose 3. And then encourage the formation and maintenance of two-parent families is TANF purpose 4. And I think every state can do this with unspent TANF funds and just sort of take a look at how you can implement some of these strategies and some of these programs so that you're not putting so much into TANF purposes 1 and 2, the needs-based programming. So we replicated a program from Texas called No Kidding, and we sort of put a little bit of an Ohio spin on it. So we call it NKO, No Kidding Ohio. And it is a pilot program to prevent pregnancy. So we're doing this sort of this pilot project in a more of a smaller county, and then also in a larger county. So in Cleveland and in Lancaster, Ohio. But again, we are supporting through this program young parents that have taken that path of becoming parents before they were actually ready. And they're receiving a salary to learn the program, telling their story. They present establishing paternity and fatherhood. So that's the Ohio spin that we did put on the program, is to infuse fatherhood into No Kidding. And then also the importance of child support. Money matters. So yes, coming from child support, and Larry, we're the same in Ohio. We are state supervised and county administered. But a lot of times our young folks don't know that, yes, you are 16 or 17 and you can be ordered to pay support, or the mother of your child, her parents can ask your parents for child support if mom is still living in her parents' home. So it's straight talk from teen parents. And again, you can use this TANF funds under TANF purpose 3 to work on that program. One of the others, which is my favorite, one of my favorites, is the Dads to Be pilot program that we are implementing. And we take a look at purposes 3 and 4. And basically what Dads to Be, that pilot project is working with expectant fathers and new fathers in 2 of our major counties, Franklin County, which is Columbus, and Montgomery County, which is Dayton. We have about 10 Ohio Equity Institute counties, OEI counties, that have high Black infant mortality. Infant mortality is an issue in Ohio. And so we know that looking at NFI's data, that infant mortality drops by 2 when dad is involved. And so we said, okay, well, why are we trying to solve this infant mortality issue in our Black communities by engaging mom only, right? So we have a program where we are working with expectant fathers, again, and new fathers, and we're giving them information, strategies regarding safe sleep, a lone back crib. So if infant baby is with you, dad, we need to make sure that you have a safe sleep environment. We're working with dads on the importance of breastfeeding, safe birth spacing, and smoking cessation. We don't care what it is you're smoking. Even if you go outside and smoke, you come back in, the smoke is in your clothes, and we don't want you to put baby up on your shoulder or your clothing the way dad is doing here. So we are prayerful, again, that fathers are taking this information and utilizing it so that we can get babies to their first birthdays. So again, that's one of the social ills that we do have in Ohio, is Black babies die at almost 3 times the rate as Caucasian babies. Most of our funding is going to the See Fathers Grant Program. We just selected programs to fund for the next 2 years to serve fathers. C is serving, educating, and empowering fathers. And we are going to provide them funds to work on parenting, of course, co-parenting, because again, you cannot be a healthy, responsible father unless you work with mom. We need to find a way to bring mom and dad to an agreement regarding how they're going to raise their baby and their child to get their children to the best outcomes possible. And then, of course, we're also going to continue to fund the economic stability of the program. One of the other topics we are going to tackle, we're calling it Roe v. Wade funding for fathers. So again, with the overturn in the law and it coming back to the states, what would we need to do? We sort of thought about this prior to the actual law being overturned. The director of ODJFS actually sent me an email and said, hey, Kim, if this happens, what does that mean for fathers? And so we had to kind of sit down and think about, okay, are we going to be prepared for fathers who may have custody of their infants if mom does not want the baby and she's unable to have an abortion, right? So regardless of where you stand on that topic, at the end of the day, there are going to be more babies coming into the world, possibly increasing the need for foster care, increasing a lot of needed resources in children's services, so forth and so on. So there is a path that we are going to work with dads on to obtain his infant if mom does not want his infant. The first thing we want him to do is put his name in what's called the putative. I have to say it putative because some folks think that I'm saying punitive, but it's putative father registry. And that stops all adoptions, private and public adoptions in Ohio, to allow dad to have paternity testing. And then our programs, we're funding them to help him navigate that path to court to gain custody of his infant. So again, more information to come on that, because again, we will start the programming in July with the 9 programs that we just selected, again, to work with fathers in that space. There are some other pilot projects that we are working on as well. EPIC, again, I mentioned Children's Services Agencies, and Jessica, thank you so much for that state-by-state report, because, we own our failing score here in Ohio. We definitely own it, but we are working to be better engagers and empowerers of fathers in the children's services arena. We are working on updating our toolkit. There is a toolkit for child protective services workers on how to engage fathers in this work. We do understand there are implicit biases that we all bring into our work, but we have to recognize those implicit biases, park them at the door before we start to work on child support cases as well as child protective services cases. We never want to bring our own experiences into another family that it could possibly harm the relationship between dad and his child. Fathers at the Education Table, the Forgotten Experts. That's another pilot project that we're working on at the local level, where we are working with fathers here in Columbus City schools whose children are on IEP, Individualized Education Plans, or 504 plans. Dads are, again, typically not invited into the school environment just, on one level, but just imagine he has a child that's on a plan, a disability learning plan. Does he understand that plan? Is he included? Will he be part of the success of his child working through that plan? Families Read, that's another one of my favorite programs. We're finding here that our kiddos are not reading at level at 3rd grade. We think about COVID learning, which there was a lot of unlearning that went on when the kiddos were no longer going to school. And so we're working with a program where fathers and their elementary and middle school students bond through reading. It's a big push for our governor here. Governor DeWine and his wife are really standing behind a lot of the reading programs in the state, because we know that if our kiddos can't read, they fail in a lot of other classes. You need reading comprehension, of course, for math, for science, history, all of the other subjects that they need to pass and graduate when they attend high school. And I'm really interested in the middle school, because there's something that happens with our kiddos, especially our boys in middle school, where that transition from the sweet lunchbox carrying elementary school kiddos to the high school, there's that transition in middle school. And so we're working with dads and their children, their middle school children, to pick up a book, put down the electronics, and let's read. And so we'll have some data from how well these kiddos are doing in school, because everything that we do is data driven. We always want to look at results and what happens when we put funding towards these programs. CLEAN is a character and confidence building curriculum for justice-involved fathers to teach them entrepreneurship, financial and business education, credit repair, so forth and so on. We find a lot of times that our restored citizens would like us to give them other paths rather than employment. They want to become business owners. So CLEAN stands for Choices, Leadership, Energy, Attitude Now. And so we are funding that program to work with CBCFs, so community-based correctional facilities. So that's the transition from incarceration back into society, working with fathers in that space of becoming entrepreneurs. And then, of course, community legal aid services in Stark County. They're serving Akron, Canton, and then Columbiana County to help non-custodial parents with developing and maintaining and nurturing relationships with their children. Now, it is TANF funding, so we don't pay for attorneys, we can't pay for representation, but we can help pay for navigating and having certain, pro bono clinics and things like that. Next slide, Ms. Rachel. So, Jessica, this will probably be very familiar to you. At the local county level, we are providing $10,000 seed money to counties in Ohio. There are 88 counties in Ohio, and I think we'll have, by the end of this year, about 31 counties complete in this process. But it is the Ohio County Fatherhood Mobilization Initiative. And what we ask the counties to do is bring 5 of the 7 entities listed there to the table. You are the leadership team. And what you will do is come together, assess what's going on in your county. 88 different counties. We have rural counties, we have middle-sized, we have metros like Cincinnati, Toledo, Columbus, and we want to know what's going on in your county. And then you have a community conversation about that. And then you provide an action plan to the Commission on Fatherhood, ODJFS, and we provide you the $10,000 seed money to move forward with mobilizing fatherhood in your respective county. OPNFF, Ohio Practitioners Network for Fathers and Families, are contracted by us to coach the counties through this process. So we don't want the counties to just sort of go out and try to figure this out on their own. We have a network of fatherhood practitioners that help coach the counties through this work. And so that's what we're doing more so at the local level. And Jessica, I know that this is sort of the model you use to do at the state level. And again, we are wrapping up this state fiscal year. So we are looking forward to receiving action plans from the counties that we're taking through this right now. And so that's my presentation on what we're doing at the state level and the local level with our TANF funds for fatherhood.
Thank you. The next presentation is by Patricia Littlejohn, who is former president of South Carolina Center for Fathers and Families, and they have a very extensive fatherhood program, including Jobs Not Jail. So how does that happen? And tell us about it.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Jessica, for leading this webinar today, and appreciate being a part of it. The South Carolina Center for Fathers and Families is a statewide nonprofit organization that emerged out of a partnership between the Sisters of Charity Foundation of South Carolina and the South Carolina Department of Social Services. We were the umbrella organization that did a lot of pass-through funding to 6 regional organizations that had 14 locations around the state. And in addition to the funding work, we did a lot of advocacy work. But I think the most important thing about that relationship was that so much of what happened in the local organization is what informed our policy work. And what was happening is that fathers were coming in and participating in the program, and then they would get a rule to show cause or maybe picked up on a bench warrant for non-payment of child support, and they would go to court, and they found themselves locked up. And the average sentence was around 6 months for non-payment of child support. And we would be so frustrated because we had been making great progress with that father, and just to lose him. So we developed a pilot project whereby at one of our local fatherhood programs, Father to Father, and a supportive judge crafted an alternative to incarceration, so that when a non-custodial parent, and I'm going to use fathers here because that was mostly what we dealt with, were behind in child support, that they could be court ordered into the local fatherhood program and participate for 6 months in lieu of being incarcerated. And we found that this had become, extremely successful. And so we wanted to be able to take this statewide and to have funding support behind it to support that. So the first thing that we did was to take the work of this pilot project and to craft our message. And I think that one of the important things about what Larry showed and what Kim did is that pilot projects are a great place to get local demonstration of how, not only why this is important to do it, but how it will really work. And so what we did is that we began to develop this bipartisan message, and basically said that for some, the threat of incarceration is a necessary motivator. But for low-income, non-custodial fathers who are behind in child support due to unemployment, not unwillingness to pay, that no amount of jail time is going to change that, and that there is a better way. And our proposal was, we can get better results and cost you less money. So why not we've already proven that this will work. And so we wanted to make it scalable. So I feel like one of the important lessons is to have a very strong and succinct message. And for us, with our legislature, and South Carolina is predominantly Republican, a cost benefit message worked really well. We certainly had to back it with why this was important, what was the benefit of it, support it with our numbers. But that was really important. I think it was also a great lesson that we had piloted this, because some people are going to stop at the why, but there are other people that you will need their support along the way, who are going to want to know a little bit more detail. How is this going to work? Is it going to cause me more work? Is this policy change going to make it more a bigger hassle or less hassle? Are we going to get better results? Are we going to be more efficient? And so there are going to be people who are going to be happy with stopping with the big picture, but then having some of that sort of ironed out and thought through to be able to answer those questions will come up. So we had our message that we knew would play well. And our next step was actually go to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. We had someone open the door for us and walk through her door and made the pitch to her that we wanted to see this scalable through all of the family courts in South Carolina. And she agreed and put her seal of approval and sent out communication to all of the local family court judges that this was something that she felt was a worthwhile endeavor, and encouraged their support. What I want to make the point about this is that oftentimes we think about policy change just happening within the walls of your legislature or within Congress. But in our case, this policy change started with the stroke of a pen. And so sometimes getting to the right person who has the right power with the right pen is what you need. And so we were very fortunate that that got the ball rolling for us. But what we also needed was the funding to back it. And so I want to tell you a little quick story. So her next message to us was, I want you to, and the Supreme Court is right across the street from our state house. And so she said, I want you to go across the street and I want you to go see Senator XYZ. He was in law school with me, and tell him that I sent you and to help you figure out how to get some funding. So my colleague and I walked out, we're standing on the street and we're looking at each other like, what? I don't know what to do. Do you know what to do? I don't know what to do. What do we do next? And so, but we just gathered ourselves and said, well, I guess we'll figure it out. And we got to do what she said to do. So my point to you is this: jumping into policy work is intimidating, but just get in there, learn from other people, and get into it. And I'll give you some other little bit of advice along the way. So we barged across the street. And the next thing that I learned about this is you can have a well-crafted message, but you have to be really strategic in how and when and where and by whom that message has to be delivered. And it has to be very strategic. And so our goal at this point was to build a groundswell of knowledge and support and understanding about the value of this pilot project, and how by integrating it and making it, a policy change with funding to support it, it would benefit everyone. And so we started on our groundswell of support. And so I want to say this: when you cannot be the lone voice in this, because you are not always going to be the person who will resonate with the person that you want to call to action. So don't get caught up in this has got to be the voice. You have to be strategic about who your messenger is. So for example, we wanted to build support among our local family court judges, our local clerks of courts, our local sheriffs, and the legislators in their homes. So it was important for us to use our local fatherhood programs to communicate that message, and local people to do that. One-on-one person who lived in the same community talking about it from the same community. Because what it boiled down to, in a lot of ways, is legislators want to hear from their voters, not necessarily the talking heads. And so that was one thing that we found was very, very important. Another thing that we found extremely powerful in communicating our message was actually hosting site visits. And we had a legislator that we brought to one of our local fatherhood programs. And I'll tell you, God smiled on us that day. Everything just went perfectly. And we had brought her there to let her see how a fatherhood program worked and why a fatherhood program was so much more beneficial and so much more results oriented than incarceration was. And that particular day, we had a father come into group. One came in, he had been very quiet, finally asked, why are you so quiet today? And he said, well, to be honest with you, I found out that my daughter was killed in a car accident this morning around 5 a.m. And I was so lost, and I didn't know where to go or who to turn to, and you're my family, and I knew that you would help me. So that's why I'm here today, but that's also why I'm so quiet. Well, you know, right there, we showed the power of the network and the brotherhood that those men had formed. Then to top all that off, another gentleman came in. He said, I was just happening by today, wanted to stop in and encourage you guys. I was a part of this program. I was way behind in child support, got a job. They helped me figure this out. I got my child support debt paid off. I'm now the assistant manager at Walmart up the street. And if any of you guys need help getting a job, I will help you get a job, but these guys will help you navigate what you need to do. That was all we needed to do. So it spoke for itself. So I'm just saying that sometimes one-pagers aren't the only way to communicate your message. A site visit can be one of those things that is very effective. We also leveraged op-eds in the newspaper where folks talked about the cost benefit of this. I will also say this, that when it came down to one-on-one conversations with legislators, I was very strategic about who I took with me or who opened the door. One example, and people don't like, you know, we like to think of things in this very pure world, but I had an occasion where I was meeting with a couple of legislators, and I had two college standout football players. One had gone on to play professional ball, who was on the board, and I brought them with me to meet one-on-one with this legislator. Well, of course, they talked about football, you know, for the first 20 minutes. And then we talked about why we were there and the importance of this. But it was so important to make that not only that personal connection, but to have develop credibility and integrity, so that by the time I got to talking about the policy issue, whatever it was, they were there because they already believed in the people who had already bought into it. And so that is very important. So I cannot stress enough of the importance of that. The other thing that we did was there was some legislation, and I think this is really important, about the child support program and about the TANF program, attaching yourself to something that might already have momentum, which was one thing that we did. At the time, there was a sentencing reform commission that was formed that was looking at how to reduce prison populations. And they were already exploring diversion programs for criminal offenses. They had not considered diversion for civil offenses. And so that was our point, that we wanted, again, to get our message in front of as many people as possible, showing the benefit that here we are. This will help reduce the prison population, make more room for those criminals that you want in jail, and not do the nonsensical of locking up non-violent offenders. And so and we really worked closely with the chair of the Sentencing Reform Commission to make sure that we testified. We also used their own data that had been generated by Pew Research to help substantiate all of that. And then last but not least, I just can't say enough about strategy. So if you've got your great message, you've got your messengers, you've delivered in all these various places, but then there comes a point in time when you're going to get right down to trying to get a piece of legislation through. And so the strategy of how you do that and the way you go about that is sometimes transcends the merits of your program. And for us, engaging a lobbyist to help us navigate those waters was very important. It was described to me one time as like playing a football game, that you play one kind of game until you get to the 20-yard line, but the game changes from the 20-yard line to the goal line. And I found that to be quite true. And so I cannot, understanding that legislative process and not being frustrated by procedures and processes and sort of how, as Jessica described, the sausage is made, a lobbyist is very helpful. But one thing that we did was, don't waste your time on lottie-dottie and everybody. You've got to know what committee you're going to, who chairs that committee, who's on the committee, who likes each other, who doesn't like each other, who staffs that committee. I cannot tell you the importance and the value of establishing relationships with the staffs to these to your legislators, as well as the staffs to the committees, because they were so extremely helpful. And so I really probably, by the time I knew what committee or subcommittee this was going to, I probably had met with every committee member before it actually even got to committee. And one of the lessons that I learned through this is that when you have a legislator who says, yes, I will support this, stop talking and say thank you. And I had an occasion where they said yes, and I kept on talking, and I really literally felt like our lobbyist pulling me out of the room. So once they say yes, say thank you very, very much and move on. A couple of real quick lessons learned. I know my time is here, but one lesson learned. I will warn you, and this is not the pretty picture part of this, there's always a snake in the grass. There's always somebody who's going to try to undermine or undo what you're doing. So, be mindful that you're going to have that snake in the grass. Do whatever you can to mitigate that. Sometimes other people that you don't want aligning with you will align with you and try to use what you're doing to advance their personal, and it can derail and sidetrack you. So you've got to be very controlled, about who's communicating your message and being clear of who's with you and who's not with you. And I think that is very, very important too. And last thing I will say is that so much about this is about relationships. And I believe that it's so important to have the right person with the right information, talking about your issue and getting to the right people who have the influence or the power to make the change. And when you only have limited time and resources, that's where you need to hone in on. And don't waste your time elsewhere. Be respectful at all levels, at all times. And I really do believe that people will be moved by your passion, by your sincerity. So don't be shy about that. And I cannot stress enough the importance of follow up and follow through. And I will just close. Can I tell a quick story, Jessica? Okay. So I had a legislator who was the chairman of the committee that we were trying to get this through, and he was very busy, of course. And my colleague and I were up at his office one day, and he was like, well, I really want to go to the bathroom and brush my teeth before I have to go to session. And so he says, will you come with me? And I was like, sure. And my colleague and I, we walked down the hall, walking down the hall with him. He walked to the men's restroom. There was sort of a little lobby area and that you could go into the men's restroom. And then it opened into where the sink was. So he goes into the bathroom. We prop the door open. I stand right inside the door of the men's restroom, and my colleague is standing in the hall, and he's brushing his teeth while I'm talking to him, and she's standing out saying, you've crossed the line. I'm not coming in there. You've crossed the line. But my point is this. I think he was moved by the passion and really wanted to hear what we had to say. And later he had asked me to follow up with some people and do some things. And one day here he was in a parking garage. And I said, Senator Thomas, we've done exactly what you've asked. Here's the results. Here's what we've done. And he said, I want to thank you for following up with me and doing some of the things that I asked, because it shows me that you're not expecting me to do all of the work here. I'm not the one carrying the load. Thank you for following through. Thank you for following up. So be encouraged. Let your passion shine. Don't be afraid. Go for it. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you. That's a great story. And with unisex bathrooms, it doesn't really matter. You could have been in there. So, okay. Brooke, tell us about the Oregon's alternative sentencing pilot program, and take it away.
Awesome. Well, hi, everyone. I am Brooke Weiss, and I work out in Oregon. I am Oregon Department of Corrections, Community Corrections Administrator, and coming from you from beautiful Oregon. I wanted to include one quick photo here on this slide of our beautiful Crater Lake National Park. And I know we are in this webinar and talking about some serious human-centered, wonderful things, and getting out in nature can be one of those absolutely needed things for us as we get through this tough work that we do. A few highlights. Crater Lake is the 7th deepest lake in the world, and it's the deepest lake in the US, amazingly enough. And it's a wonderful place to be taking our families and taking those to connect and really just support the family unit. So I'm going to dive into our family sentencing alternative pilot program and talk with you all a little bit about how things got started legislatively. Also a few little data pieces that I have to share today, and just kind of going in and talking a little bit about some hits with the program, some roadblocks and some fines that we've come up with through the launching of FSAP. Let's see, Rachel, next slide. So when we talk about the family sentencing alternative pilot program's beginnings, really what this is we had a situation where some fantastic Oregon advocacy groups, local and statewide public safety council representatives got together and collaborated and established House Bill 3503 in 2015. It was launched in partnership with Department of Corrections, Department of Human Services, county community corrections agencies, and circuit courts in 2016. The FSAP program, as we call it, is really was set up as a 10-year pilot project as we moved forward from 2016. And it's involving community-based programs in which eligible nonviolent primary parents facing prison sentences are able to continue their parenting role by being diverted from prison. And so really what this looks like is we're taking a collaborative approach to promote reunification of families, prevent children from entering the foster care program in the first place if we can, reducing the chances participants and their children will become involved in the criminal justice system again. So those are the focuses of FSAP. Oregon has 5 participating counties: Columbia County, Jackson County, Marion County, Multnomah, and Washington County. And just for reference, we do have 36 counties in the state of Oregon. And so participation rate is just with these 5 counties. A wonderful fact is that over 524 children have been positively impacted by the FSAP program. As their parents have been routed and steered away from the prison system, we have been able to keep these children connected with their families. Children of parents in FSAP have a substantially shorter average stay in foster care than children in foster care with incarcerated parents. 782 days on average compared to 1,066 days statewide. To date, FSAP has served and impacted 290 adults. 75 of those adults are fathers, 215 are mothers. Our current statewide FSAP program participants is at 76 right now across the 5 counties. Successful completions for our FSAP program are 144 total to date, 27 fathers and 117 mothers. So with FSAP, we're coming upon our 10-year pilot program mark. We're doing some evaluation to determine the benefits and the success pieces of this program. Is it working? Do we continue? We're also partnering with the CJC, the Criminal Justice Commission, to evaluate and determine the effectiveness of the program to date. When we look at program obstacles or challenges, I think we all share that there have been some pandemic impacts across all of our programs. And, we felt this for sure with our FSAP program, and that, our parole and probation officers, for instance, in Washington County, which is one of the participating counties for FSAP, really struggled with making that connection with our parents and children during the pandemic when we were scaling back and unable to have that in-person contact. The Family Sentencing Alternative Pilot Program is a community-based program. And so if we're looking here on the slide, we can see one of the pictures I have up looks like a living room setting. And this is one of the county's projects that they rolled out for their FSAP program. This is another county, Jackson County's living room, if you will. They call their FSAP program and this space the collaborative. And they've worked together to bring in this space, DHS, Pathfinders Group, Jackson County Community Corrections, and making this a space that's comfortable for our littles and parents to come and be connecting there and working the FSAP program, receiving services, and that sort of thing. So creating a space was really important during the pandemic time, and also just in general for our FSAP programs in these various counties. One of the things I think we can agree with is going to see a parole officer or probation officer at an actual building or location can be very intimidating or scary, if you will. And so taking that to another place and creating an atmosphere and a space where people can really feel comfortable if they do have to come in. But again, FSAP is really community-based, so the focus for all of our parole officers within the program is to be out in the community, to be connecting at their homes and place of stay. The Family Sentencing Alternative Pilot Program does have a budget set up to where we can have specific housing. So our FSAP participants can share the same house and be together there, learn together, have a mentor connected, and a place where their children can run free and feel comfortable. And this housing piece of the program can last up to, maybe even 6 months at times, because we're really looking at that Maslow's hierarchy of needs and establishing that, hitting those initial pieces that a human needs when they're really at a point of breaking in their life and they end up entering the system, and they're really saying to themselves, not only am I just trying to make ends meet, but now I'm on supervision and I'm having to figure out how I'm going to balance being a mom or being a father. And so I think with this approach and where FSAP has gone, it's really looking at a trauma-informed, gender responsive approach at providing supervision, which is in an intensive format. We like to highlight risk and need responsivity in the work that we do with each of our participants. This means that prior to entry, the parole and probation officers are reaching out and they are completing a very comprehensive and rigorous evaluation that is in partnership with Department of Human Services. It may or may not include an alcohol and drug early on evaluation, and all of that is compiled in a defendant assessment report. And that gives the courts, the judge, the district attorney, the defense, Department of Human Services, all of these core pieces about the individual entering that is going to include, hey, what areas are they going to be struggling with and have they been struggling with over the years? What are our focus areas? What will this person need as they navigate being a part of this program? So within that structure, the 5 counties have slightly different caps depending on their allotment of budget. So with, for instance, highlighting Washington County, we have a cap at 30 for those POs. And that way they can spend the much needed time that they need to with mom or dad. And also, again, this is wraparound, this is collaborative. It's well beyond what some may recall as the process for someone being on supervision, where it would be the justice involved individual and just that PO or probation officer. This is going beyond that and ensuring that we are having partnership. All are involved and have say in that person's navigation and journey while on supervision. As we move forward here, some additional challenges that have popped up is the program is set to be 12 months. Unfortunately, during the pandemic, we had some hurdles with this. We had delays in sentencing. We had to develop quick case resolve dockets. At times we saw that supervision and time in the program, in the Family Sentencing Alternative Pilot Program, had to be extended out. Individuals maybe became ill, family members were hospitalized, children were needing to be placed with mom possibly or dad to recover from COVID. And so looking at all of that, our judges across the state had to look at different options for ensuring that these folks get through their program. And so there were a lot of different modifications made to help individuals succeed. We did see a heightened number of revocations during that time and coming out of COVID, as there was a backlog with getting through to different, hearings happening at that time. We ended up with quite a few of these getting resolved at one point, and that affecting our revocation rate. While generally overall, the success rate for those in the FSAP program is very high, and we do have a very low recidivism rate or chance that somebody would reoffend, and we calculate that both at the statutory recidivism rate for the state of Oregon and also measuring within 3 years of completion of FSAP, do they pick up a new conviction, misdemeanor or felony? And for the ones that don't, we calculate that as a heightened success for the program. Additionally, were we able to keep these children with their parents or with their mom or dad or guardian? And that is our goal. We're wanting to also reduce prison bed usage. So these cases are all presumptive prison cases. And with that, we are receiving them as what we call a downward dispositional departure. And we are working to keep these folks through their supervision period and not landing in prison. So we're doing all that we can. And that again is through use of the model of risk, need, and responsivity and partnership with Department Human Services. Just to kind of get in and finalize here, I'm not sure where I am at with time, Jessica.
Yeah, I think we want to move on to questions. So please wrap up quick.
I will do that. Okay. So just to sum things up, couple of factors or strategies that we utilized is really just ongoing evaluation of the program in partnership with Criminal Justice Commission and advocacy groups, and keeping those relationships going to ensure we're doing the right things with the program. And that is all that I have. Thank you all
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you very much. Some of the questions that have come in have been around funding and what kind of funding could be available for fatherhood services and programs and policies. And I want to note that there are $5.2 billion of uncommitted TANF funds nationwide. And 22 states do use some of TANF funds for what could be called father issues, although it's not rigorous that it is father, but the percentage is less than 0.5%. On average, it's 0.5%. So how do you tap into that? And it looks like, Larry, did you get money from that pot for pass through, or was that general funds, or Pat, did you tap that? Kim, I know you've tapped that. Let's talk about money.
Jessica, the funding for pass-through is from the general fund, but there, as you mentioned, there are plenty of states that have excess TANF block grant dollars available, and Colorado is one of those. So we were successful a few years ago to obtain funding out of the TANF block grant reserve to create employment programs for parents and fathers. And the legislature this go around just gave us additional funding to go another 3 years. So that is certainly an option.
Okay.
Absolutely, Jessica. Yeah, and you're correct. When I first started in this seat, we had $1 million a year. So $2 million over a 2-year period. What we did working with the State Office of Child Support, showing return on investment as we fund fatherhood programs, showing the recidivism rate decreasing. Again, that's what our legislators and our governor likes to hear and see. When we put this money into fatherhood, what is it fruiting? What are the return on taxpayer dollars? And so that's why we now sit with the 11 million over the next 2 years.
Pat, you're nodding.
Yes, we have a blend of state TANF funding through a contract with the Department of Social Services. And then we also have a dedicated funding stream from the legislature specifically for the Jobs Not Jail program. I forgot to mention that we did land the money and have enjoyed that for several years. But the one thing I will say, I think that braiding funding is a really important thing to do. And as a fatherhood believer to the core, I think that there's probably not a funding source that cannot be touched by fatherhood. And I think that I think being creative about that, but I think definitely TANF is a much underutilized source of funding for this. And then again, to Kimberly's point, when you begin to show return on investment and cost savings, we demonstrated over through 2020 that we had saved taxpayers $22 million in incarceration costs. And we had cost the state, a fraction of that to administer the program.
Okay. Anything to add? Brooke, your efforts come from DOC budget, or do you get a line item, or what?
Ours come from the Criminal Justice Commission.
I see. Okay. Okay.
We have another funding related question. If we were encouraging a state effort to build fatherhood programs using federal dollars, what are the core partners who are needed? Child support, TANF, community-based organizations focused on fathers, etc.
Anyone want to take it?
A lot of different folks you can collaborate with. Again, what we did and continue to do is look at the societal ills. What is really plaguing Ohio? Drug addiction, right? Children, foster care, kinship care cases going into child support, child protective services. Again, thanking you, Jessica, for your state-by-state report. I would certainly look at that as well, see where your state is failing. Those are the folks you need to collaborate with. So we do have House Bill 7, which is also pending along with the budget bill that says that the director from the Department of Health shall now go into an MOU with the Commission on Fatherhood as one of the programs, because absolutely, dads being there for a lot of these issues happening, maternal morbidity, infant mortality. I really liked Pat's conversation about it's not just about TANF. We need to solve a lot of other issues and other programs. So they're starting to put some skin in the game as well. So we can actually take on dollars that are coming through health to work now. It doesn't always have to be TANF funds.
Okay,
I will add that, we also had a partnership with our Department of Health and Environmental Control and looking at maternal, infant, child health dollars and the role of fathers in maternal and infant child health. You can always look at probation, pardon, and parole. We also, look closely at how we could partner with workforce development to provide some job readiness workshops, etc., that would support helping people to be more prepared to be placed in employment. So I leave no stone unturned. No stone unturned.
right. And hopefully there's some money lurking in some of those federal initiatives now, also infrastructure bill. And I know there's efforts to claw back some of the other funds from recent federal legislation, but fingers crossed, maybe there's some. Rachel, anything else?
I just want to, oh, sorry, go ahead, Pat.
I was just going to add Healthy Start is also a great federal program that has some really strong fatherhood connections as well, can have some strong fatherhood connections as well.
Right, right.
I do just want to let everyone know that the state-by-state report that's been referenced, the direct link is available on this last slide. So the report and these slides and the recording of this webinar will all be on frpn.org. So I just wanted to make that clear that's there. So that's there if anybody needs it. And yeah, if anyone has any, I kind of cut off the last conversation about federal core partners for federal funds. If anyone has any thoughts on that or any other points.
Larry, how did you find Senator Kafalis and get him as a champion?
He started it on his own. He's been very active. He was very active in human services related policy issues. And he was part of the TANF redesign efforts locally and nationally. So he felt it was an important thing. So he was
terrific. You didn't have to follow him into a bathroom to get it. No.
No, we might have been in the same restroom, but not brushing teeth.
Okay.
And Larry, you're absolutely correct. It helps when you have folks at the top that really support the work with the commission. It was one of our General Assembly members that actually started the Ohio Commission on Fatherhood in '99 and put us into statute that we shall exist. So when you have that leadership support, it is so helpful.
That's terrific. Well,
and there were some specific questions for panelists in the Q&A, and just, unfortunately we're running out of time, but all the panelists' contact information are in the slides. So I'm don't want to speak for everybody, but definitely feel free to follow up with them if you have any additional questions that we unfortunately weren't able to answer today, and that they can talk about their specific policy and program a bit more.
And Larry, we have a request for your report. So say if you would send us your pass-through report, that we'll make sure to get it out to the individual who'd like it. I want to,
Jessica, thank you.
I want to thank the panelists and for participating, for your wisdom. You've been in the trenches doing this for these many years, and it's an inspiration. And again, thank everybody else for joining us. Check the website, give us a day or two to get the recording downloaded and posted, and the slides and everything else, and have a great rest of Tuesday. So bye-bye, and see you next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.